Today we are going to be starting the Mishna Berura in the beginning of sefiras haomer. We already had two sessions on this. One was we learned in depth about the obligation of women in Sefira. Two was an introduction in which we also discussed why women do not count and do not recite a bracha when they're counting for the 7 clean days. Additionally, we discussed why we do not recite a shachianu on Sfira. It's a new mitzvah, and we split that session up into three different recordings. So now we are actually just going to run through the Mishnah Berura, and then in the next session we will dissect parts of this Mishnah Berura because there's around 10 different topics within the Mishnah Berura, close to 10 that we didn't even cover yet. So we're just going to run through the Mishnah Berura classic right now. Shulchan Aruch begins by saying, well, first the Siman is Siman Taf Beites Seder Tfilas Lo Sheni Pesach Usiras Haomer Bo Yitzifim. Of course, these are the halachas of Usiras Haomer. Yoshan Chadash is going to come up at the end of the Siman. Below Sheni Acher Tfilas Arvis Maschil Nispar Omer. On the second night of Pesach after Ma'ariv, we begin counting Sfira. Yimshachach Lispar B'Techilas Halayla Hoylich V'Soifer Kol Halayla. And if a person forgot to count Sfira in the beginning of the night, you could continue counting the entire night. So you could count the entire night up until dawn. Simple explanation is with a bracha. The Mishnah Berura in Aleph says, Belel Sheni. Well, actually, before we start the, we'll see the Mishnah Berura. Belel Sheni, Kasvu Achronim Da'omrim Ma'aravis, Hashayach Liyom Sheni. That we say something called Ma'aravis, which applies to the second day. This is a type of piyut that they used to say. Afilu Chal Al Sheni Mimotzi Shabbos, even if the second night of Pesach falls out after Shabbos. Fafal Pi de Beshare Chagim Shechal Yom Rishon B'Shabbos Oimim Ma'aravis Shel Yom Rishon Belel Sheni. And even though that on other holidays where it falls out, Sunday is going to fall out on Shabbos, we say Ma'aravis of the first day on the second night. Shani Hacha, we are different on Ma'aravis U'Minyan Shel Sfira. This has to do with Sfira. Achar Tfilas Arvis, V'Kodem Aleinu. We say Sfira after Ma'ariv Shmona Esrei, but before Aleinu. The Kol Mad De'efsher La'agdume Makdimin, because the earlier you are able to do Sfira, the better. Kadeshi is Kayim Yoser, in order that you could fulfill in a enhanced and better manner, Mashakos of that which the pasuk of Vayikra says, Timimos Tiyana, it will be completeness. Now, obviously, this is only referring to do it as early as possible once it's the proper time to do Sfira. If it's not the proper time, then obviously this wouldn't apply.
What says?
Correct. Maschilon Lespor, you begin counting Sfira. This is the Mishnah Berura that we learned in depth because this was talking about women and their counting of the Sfira. We're just gonna run through this Mishnah Berura and Gimel over here. It says we count Sfira. This is the women. Again, we already saw this in depth. Women slaves are exempt from this mitzvah of Sfira, the Havi mitzvah because it's a time-bound mitzvah. The Magen Avram writes, they already made this an obligation upon themselves. The simple explanation behind this mitzvah is that it is time-bound and therefore they're exempt according to the Ramban that we learned in depth. It would not be time-bound. There were different explanations of that Ramban that we learned. Magen Avram says that they already made it on themselves like an obligation. We already discussed this in depth. How could they make themselves obligated on something that they're exempt from? Don't learn out from Ma'ariv, because Ma'ariv was originally an argument if it's going to be obligatory or optional. So therefore you could rely on the opinion who holds that it is in fact obligatory, and that's why we accepted Ma'ariv Shmona Esrei upon ourselves, men, to do. Shema, for sure you have to do at night, because the pasuk says so maybe it's so you can't learn out from Shema, because over here there's really no opinion who says that women are obligated to begin with, notwithstanding that Ramban, because it's really, there's different explanations that in and of itself. So we saw maybe can learned out from Shofar, which they accepted on themselves. So just like shofar, women, it's time bound mitzvah, they're exempt from it till they accepted it on themselves. So too over here, or perhaps it could be learned out from Musaf. There's an argument of women are obligated in Musaf, and according to opinion, says that they're obligated, they accept it upon themselves, even though it's time bound and they're exempt from. So too over here, Bikimaduma. Says the Mishnah Berura quoting right, so says the Mishnah Berura quoting others will see this is the pre Chodesh that we saw briefly discussed this, and others as you see in the Sharat seem to be in our countries the custom is for women not to count at all. Custom is for Shulchan Shlomo writes that they would not recite a bracha. If they would count, they would still not recite a bracha. Because they would certainly make a mistake one day. It's also a lot of the women, they do not know the explanation of the words. This is certainly true around 100 years ago. Most women were illiterate. The question on this conclusion on the Mishnah Berurah and the Shulchan Shlomo and the logic is why would they not say bracha? Because they can make a mistake. What type of mistake is this talking about? And men can also make a mistake. Furthermore, it says that the women don't know the explanation of the word, so too men don't know the explanation of the word. So the basic explanation over here is that they're going to make a mistake. This doesn't mean that they're not going to make it through the entire sefira, and then they're retroactively going to lose all the brachas that they said in the previous nights when they missed a night. That's not what it means. That the Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in the Licha Shalom already says the previous brachas would still count. The chida is a doubt if those brachas count or not. What this means is that they're not going to know the halacha that if you miss one night, then you could no longer count with the bracha. So the women are going to continue counting with the bracha, and that's going to be a bracha in vain. Obviously, that could also happen to a man. And also what could happen to a man is he doesn't know the explanation of the words. So the answer to those questions is that men are obligated from the letter of the law originally. They're totally obligated in this mitzvah. So therefore, they have to do it. Women, as opposed to women, conversely, women who are not obligated. Therefore, when you couple in these other factors, you throw in these other reasons, that's why they would not recite the bracha, and that's the ruling of the Mishnah Berura. This is also Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach holds at the end of the day. You would advise all the females in his household not to say sfira with a bracha. In the house of the stipler, they would count with a bracha. We saw that Rav Elyashiv Zatzal says that a woman who is a wise woman, she knows a lot of Torah, is married to an Eishes Chaver, is married to a Talmid Chacham, someone who is a Torah scholar, and additionally she's very careful and scrupulous with how she performs the mitzvahs in general, she could count sfira with a bracha. Kaf HaChaim pointed out that the Sephardi women certainly should not be saying a bracha because they don't say any brachas on time-bound mitzvahs as opposed to Ashkenazim, except for tzitzis and tefillin, which obviously women don't do. That we hold that they could do the time-bound mitzvahs if they want to, such as shofar, lulav, sukkah, etc. However, they would not say the bracha. The Sephardi women, the Ashkenaz women, they would say bracha. They would do the mitzvah and say the bracha. But the Sephardi women would not say any bracha at all. They're not allowed to. So certainly over here they would not say the bracha. Kaf HaChaim takes it a step further, based on a Zohar also, who says that women should not even count sfira at all. It's a male mitzvah. Seems like the custom is not that way. Kaf HaChaim does say that if a woman is going to count sfira, so she should listen to a male recite the bracha, have in mind to fulfill obligation with that bracha, then immediately count after. This way she's not saying the bracha, and she's not allowed to anyways, but she could still fulfill her obligation with the bracha. Shmei Kona listening is like answering. So that's a tactic that he suggests. It's basically a brief summary of what we discussed at length about women and sfira, a good recap for Chazara, or just going through these Mishnah Berurahs in general. You could count the entire night. As long as the night didn't pass, you didn't leave from what the pasuk says that it shall be completeness. The Ber Halacha over here in the first one quotes an interesting Mora Uksio who says the reason that you count after davening as opposed to before. Why don't you count before Ma'ariv? He says in the earlier generations, the custom was to daven Ma'ariv before it was nighttime, and when they would finish Ma'ariv, that's when 3 stars came out, and therefore that's when they would count. However, the Chok Yaakov says that no, you need to say Shema and Shmona Esrei before sfira from the letter of the law because of Tadir V'Sheinu Tadir Kodim, something that is more common precedes. And therefore, based on this Chok Yaakov, which comes up actually later on in our Siman, Sifkat and Tazayin, you see all the way over there. So based on this Chok Yaakov, even though that nowadays we're davening later anyways, and you could therefore count zero before, according to this Chok Yaakov, you would not do it before. Why? Because Shema and Shemona Esrei is more common. Regarding is sefira from the obligation from the Torah, or is it just from the rabbis? So according to the Rambam in Hilchos Tamidim and Musafim, Perek Zayin Halacha Chavav Chav Beis, as well as the Chinuch Mitzvah Shin Vav, there's an obligation from the Torah even nowadays. However, from the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch and many poskim, it seems like nowadays we just commemorate that we had in the base of Mikdash, that we had a Korban Omer, and that seems to be the general consensus of most Rishonim, including the Ran and the Psachim. And then the Be'er Halacha proceeds to quote many others who also hold that nowadays it would be, in fact, be an obligation from the Torah. You look at this Be'er Halacha, he brings a nice list of great Rishonim who hold that it is from the Torah. And he says, accordingly, that this is why many people are very careful not to count sefiras haomer before Seitzah Chochavim, before when 3 stars come out. And afterwards, he says, I found that the Eli Rabbah says a similar idea as well. So this is where it will come from. That's a sif that comes up later, counting sefira after sunset, but before when 3 stars come out, or after even Plaga Mincha, which is before sunset. So that's another topic in and of itself, in another sif in the simon. The Shulchan Aruch continues and says, "U'mitzvah al kol echad lispelas." What's a mitzvah for everyone to count by himself, independently, on his own. Okay, so let's dissect this next topic. That's all I'm saying. It's a lot of topics in this one sif. So the Mishna Berura says, and we'll just get a basic understanding now. We will definitely dive a little deeper in this in the upcoming sessions that we have. Lisper la'atzmo, it's a mitzvah for everyone to count themselves. Because the pasuk says, "Usfartim lachem," that you shall count. Mashma shehamitzvah chal al kol yochid v'yochid. It's implied that this mitzvah of sefira falls on every single individual. That every individual must personally count. V'nei mashma mizeh. It's implied from this that sefira ina kimo shar mitzvah satalu yamir linyan kiddush v'adul kiyotze bezeh. That sefira, it's implied from this that sefira is not like other mitzvahs which are dependent on speech. For example, kiddush, havdalah, and the like. Other mitzvahs, if you heard from your friend and you had in mind to fulfill your obligation with him, you would fulfill your obligation because listening is like answering. That would work. Torah, and over here the Torah reveals to us, you wouldn't fulfill your obligation if you listen to someone else. As long as you didn't count yourself. Why? Because the pasuk says, "Usfartem lachem," you shall count, so you have to do it yourself. So now, according to this, we have big issues. So then what is the point of the chazan doing sefira and shul? If everyone's going to be counting on their own anyways. We have to figure that out. But some achronim write, the kavanas ha-Torah, the intention of the Torah is, rak, that we should only not say rather, deloy nema, we shouldn't say the mitzvah zo abezdin lavadkai, kimo b'shmitim v'yoyv l'tichsev sham v'sefarta l'cha. We shouldn't say that this mitzvah, sefiras haomer, only applies to Bezdin. Just like Shemitah and Yovel. Shemitah every 7 years. You have a Shemitah cycle, you leave the land fallow and you don't touch it. Also Yovel every 49 years. So Bezdin is the one who does the counting over there. So we wouldn't want to say that this mitzvah is just on Bezdin of Sfira. That's why it says, "Usfartim lachem," you shall count. You shall count, meaning excluding Bezdin. Bezdin shouldn't count like Shemitah and Yovel. Sefiras haomer is different. But the truth of the matter is, rather, this mitzvah sefiras haomer goes on the congregation. But the truth of the matter is, if you heard from your friend that he was counting, you heard your friend counting, this kavin law states, and you had it in mind to fulfill your obligation. The gam lechavero, and also your friend. Kivein lahaitzio had in mind to fulfill your obligation. Yasi, you fulfill your obligation. Just like in all places where we hold that listening is like answering. So technically, at the end of the day, you could fulfill your obligation by listening to sefira from someone else. If you look at this Be'er Halacha over here, he quotes more sources for this about filling obligation through shomei ka'ona. Listening is like answering by sefira, and he quotes achronim who argue about this, and then he says that really this could go back to the time of the Rishonim already. Okay, and the Be'er Halacha quotes more of the sources over there. Now this is all talking about, we have 2 parts of sefira, the actual counting, and then we have the bracha before. Says the Mishna Berura, "V'kol zeh b'sfira." Everything that we just mentioned is talking about with the actual counting. However, the bracha shemavarkan al sfira, when it comes to the bracha that we say the bracha on the counting, the kuli olma efshalotze salidei chaviru afilu hu baki kimo b'kol brachos. Everyone agrees it's possible to fulfill your obligation by listening to your friend, even if he's an expert, just like on all brachos. So the bracha for sure, you can fulfill your obligation. Listening is like answering. Miyu, however, minag b'kol Yisrael shekol echem avarch v'sof l'atma. However, the custom is in all places for every single Jew to count personally himself. Or not to rely on the chazan. So, in other words, even though technically speaking, you could rely on someone else and they can fulfill your obligation, the custom is not to do that. Rather, everyone should personally count themselves. If you look in the Sha'ar Tziyun and Osei over here, he says, if you have a suffix, you have a certain shaila, it's questionable if you're able to recite the bracha. So in that case, you should certainly listen to someone else recite the bracha. Have in mind to fulfill your obligation with that bracha, and that's what's correct to do. Because if you have a doubt on the bracha, we say suffix bracha lacha. A doubt on the bracha, you should be lenient and not say it. But now here's an option of you tapping into a bracha without potentially reciting the bracha in vain, and then you would count on your own after. Truth of the matter is, this idea is a similar idea to what the Kaf HaChaim said by women in Sfira, that a woman should listen to a male say the bracha and then count after. Same idea, because you have a doubt with the bracha, like we saw in the Mishna Berura, the Shulchan Shlomo. The next Mishna Berura continues and says, Kasva Achronim to Sfira Mutter B'Kol Lashon. Sfira you can count in any language technically. This is like another topic in our Sif. Ubilvet, as long as Sheyavin Oisa Lashon, as long as you understand that language. If you don't understand the language that you're counting in, even if you did it in Hebrew, you would not fulfill your obligation at all. So this is an eye opener for those who count in Hebrew who don't know what they're saying. They don't fulfill their obligation at all. This is similar to by Bedikas Chametz when we say the Kol Chamira. The point over there in the Mishnah Berurah also specifies this over there. You have to understand what you're saying. If you don't understand it, then you should say it in your own language. You wouldn't fulfill your obligation at all. There are not so many halachas that you wouldn't fulfill your obligation with at all if you didn't do them. This is one of them, and this is something to be very careful about. To cave under lo yoda haomer in sefiras. If you don't know what you're saying, that's not considered counting because you don't even know what you're saying.
Like davening.
That's right. Certain parts of davening you need to understand. Most of it you don't. You need to understand the first paragraph of Shemona Esrei and the first pasuk of Shema because you have to have proper intent, kavanah, in that. The Shulchan Aruch continues says Sarach Lispor Ma'umar Levarach Chila. You have to count Sfira while you're standing, and you have to make the bracha beforehand. So this is yet another few topics in the Sif. Sarach Lispor Ma'umar, you have to do a standing. V'Sarach La'amod Mishar Shemas L'Bracha. You need to stand from the beginning of when you start reciting the bracha. B'di'evet if you himself Miyushiyah, it's a b'di'evet post facto. If you did sfira with the bracha while sitting, you still fulfill your obligation, but preferably you should stand. Sha'ar Tziyun over here in Vav says, wait a second, even though in all places you can fulfill your obligation if you did in Hebrew, even though you don't understand it, over here is worse. This is similar to what it says in Siman Nun Sivkat and Beis. Obviously, we know what's going on over there. Mitzvah Sfichas Kavanah? No, Mitzvah Sfichas Kavanah is in Siman Samach Sif Daled. Right? Siman Nun is right, but no, so close. Psukkah Zimmer very good is Nun Aleph. So Siman Nun is the short Siman on why do we say Ezeo Makoman? Over there, the Mishna Berura says if you don't know the meaning of Ezeo Makoman, doesn't count. You have to know it. You have to say Ezeo Makoman every single day. You have to say Tamid Ezeo Makoman Rabbi Shmuel before Psukkah Zimmer, and you have to know what Ezeo Makoman says. No point. Supposed to count as Torah. The Sha'ar Tziyun in Zion says that all mitzvahs need to preferably be done standing, and if it's not done standing, then you always have to ask why. Especially sfira. Many Rishonim they based on the pasuk me'achel chermesh bakama al tukri bakama el bakama. The simple explanation of this pasuk is when you begin, when the sickle begins cutting the standing stalk. Don't read it as standing stalk, rather read it as standing. So, by the way, good trivia question. How do we know that all mitzvahs, the brachos you need to do while standing? The answer is this pasuk. It's all learned out from Sfira, from this drasha. So you see that this mitzvah of Sfira is a very powerful mitzvah because any time that we stand when we do any mitzvah, daled minim, whatever it is that we do, it's derived from this. So that's something very powerful to point out from a halachic perspective. Be'er Halacha also uh, quotes this over here and some more about these points. Mishna Berura says the Shulchan Aruch continues with another topic of this sif. It was up to me; I would have broken it down into multiple sifim. But v'soifar yom v'shvuos, you have to count the days and the weeks. Kate said, "How is that?" But yom harishon oimer, on the first day you say hayom yom echad ba'omer. The Ramah says today is the first day ba'omer. It's a whole discussion ba'omer la omer. We'll have to see about
Didn't
that.
say haomer or haomer. He just said
You didn't say
today.
anything. First day you say saying says day one. Ad shemagil l'shiva yomim, until you reach the seventh day. Once you reach the seventh day, then you got to cook them with the weeks. V'az yomer, then you say hayoim shiva. Today is the seventh day.
Wow. He didn't say haomer or haomer. Is that Sfardim? Does Sfardim not say haomer or haomer?
I messed up with the PDF here. Yeah, we're going to discuss the ba and the la.
And also the word haomer. I mean, it's not sure.
Yes, correct. Hayoim shiva yamim shehim shvu achad ba omer. The Ramah says again. Today is the 7 days, 1 week in the omer. B'yom hashmini yomer. On the eighth day, you say hayoim shmona yamim shehim shvu achad v'yom achad ba omer. The Ramah does it 4 times over here. On the eighth day, you say today is the 8th day, 1 week and 1 day. And similarly, ad she'egil arba'asar le'arba'asar, until you reach the 14th day. Yomer, then you say hayom arba'asar yomim. Today is 14 days, shehem shnei shavuos, which is 2 weeks. Ba'omer, the Ramah says for the 4th time, the Ba'omer. He really wants you saying the base. Now with the lamed. And this is how you count until the 49th day. Mishna Berura continues and says, like to finish the whole Mishna Berura on the Sif. So far, Yom Vashvuos Techtiv, the pasuk says, "Tisapru chamishim yom." You shall count 50 days. Uksiv in the pasuk says, "Shiva Shavuos Tisaper Loch." Count 7 weeks. So you see, you have to count the days, weeks. It's a sugya in Maseches Menachos. V'im sipar Yom L'chol V'lo Hizkir Shavuos. Let's say you only counted the days and you didn't count the weeks. Yay, Shairim. Some say shiatz b'di'ed, but you fulfill your obligation post facto. Not preferable, but it would still work. But some say no. That you actually need to go back. You need to return and count the days and the weeks according to halacha. The weeks are so important that if you didn't count the weeks, you wouldn't fulfill your obligation at all. And therefore, you need to return and count again, but without a bracha. Without a bracha, because you have it down in the bracha. Because maybe you did fulfill your obligation. But if you did forget to return and count the days and the weeks together, you would still count the other days with the bracha. So you see that from the letter of the law, if you just counted the days, then technically speaking, it would work. And that's also the reason why you wouldn't go back and do the bracha. I mean, let's say you just counted the weeks and not the days. You could go on, for example, you said, for example, on the 7th day, today is week 1, but you didn't mention days. Still, everyone agrees you won't follow your obligation. You wouldn't get anything. So you see the days are more important than the weeks at the end of the day.
So
you get it at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Gemara says mitzvah
Yes.
Correct. It's a package deal.
Correct. It's a package deal, preferably. But if it wasn't done, the days are more important than the weeks. Ba'omer, barov poskim anusach la omer. Says the Mishna Berura, most poskim say la omer. Forget about the Rama who mentioned it 4 times. Let's talk about it. From the letter of the law, this is only preferably. What do? This is the cherry on the cake. This isn't the actual cake. You're getting the cake regardless. Right? You're going to be able to have your cake and eat it too. Eat your cake and have it too. There's only like a chiluk. Kedei levar shehu moinem yom shekri v'asam v'hal. In order to explain that you are counting from when they brought the omer, and furthermore, v'im lo omer ella. And but if you only said these PDFs here, but if you only said, where is this place here? I messed up the file. if you only said, where are we? V'imlo amar elo, if you only said, oy vavoy, I don't know where that continues. Nami yatsa. I think if you only said, we have to get the full version. What does it say? I don't know if I made a thing over here. Messed up with one of the PDF files. Sorry, guys. Running out of time also. So Yod Gimel. It's got to be in Ches. Must be over here. They don't put it on, I think.
That's like a small word.
I don't know what it says. Let me see. Hold on. No, I got it. I got it right here. I got it over here. I got it over here. V'im lo amar. Here is this. So many pages of commentary you got to get through. Is it? Yeah, v'im lo amar elo. But if you only said, v'bracha shemavarchen al sfilo. No, that's the same page. V'im lo amar elo. If you only said hayom kach v'kach nami yatzin. Today and so, you would also fulfill your obligation. In other words, if you left out the ba omer and the la omer, you would still fulfill your obligation. It should be pointed out. I just want to briefly share. I know we only have a few minutes and I want to finish all this, but very quickly, what I do is I try to cover both opinions. So I do the ba omer first and then I do la omer after. So you have nothing to lose by doing that. There's no problem with Atala. I do ba first because that's all I
No, I
have.
say you do ba first, but you don't say ba omer lo omer. You say the whole thing.
Yes, the whole
And
thing.
then the whole thing.
Correct. We'll learn about it more though. Okay, B'yom Hashmin on the eighth day. V'yim lo amar ela hayom shmona yamim v'lo siyam shem shavu achad. If you only say today is the eighth day, but you did not conclude that it is the first week, namayatsu, you'd also fulfill your obligation. Because you mentioned the weeks yesterday and the seventh day. That's something interesting which the previous Mishna Berura didn't say. If you gave the shout out to the week, if you mentioned the week once, you could already be more lenient, continuing on that week. And similarly, if you only said Hayom Shavu Achad, today is 1 week, Yom Achad, and the first day B'lachod alone Namiyatza, you would also fulfill your obligation. Because you already mentioned the days, everything that passed on the day. Okay. Then it says Shavu Achad v'lo Achas. You say Shavu Achad and not Achas. First week. You say Shnei Shavuos. You do not say Shtei. Two. The Shavua Lashon Zachar, because week is in the masculine tense. It's just technicalities of how to pronounce and how to say it. You do Shnei, not Shtei.
Shavuos, which is feminine.
Right, correct. Adasara Omer Yamim. Until 10 days, you say Yamim. Umechadasar ve'elach Omer Yom. From the 11th day and on, you say Yom. Chen yesh lomar minyan hamuat metachila. You should say the amount that is less first. Could go on, for example, Echad ve'esrim Yom. The 21st day, but you say Echad first. You put the one first. V'chol elu hadvarim ein li kuva ela v'tzachos halashon. All of this would not hold the person back post facto b'diavad. Rather, it's just to clear the language up. The most clear way of saying it. Val derech umina gloimer achasri yiratzon. There's a custom say yiratzon after three etc. Sheyibanu beis hamikdash, that the beis hamikdash should be rebuilt. Kloimar, meaning to say, va'az nekai mitzvahs havas omer, and then once the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, we will fulfill the mitzvah of bringing the korban omer properly. Yesh nohag and gamkin lomer mizmar lokim yecha nenehu v'goimer. Some have a custom to say this mitzvah. Kasva achronim Mishna Berura Yud Aleph. Dim Omer B'Lashon Achiv, if you said it in another way, could go on. B'Yom Shloshim, on the 30th day, V'Tishim, the 39th day, Omer, you said Hayom Arba'im Chaser Achas Nami Yatza. Today is the 40th day minus 1, you would also fulfill your obligation. I'll just end with the question, if you write down the day and the week of the Omer, would you fulfill your obligation or not? You need to verbally say it. Okay, so we will.
I think you'd be okay if you write it down. You're okay.
You'll be okay. Why? The pasuk says Svartim Lachem. You have to count it. You shall count it.
Yeah, but you're acknowledging the date.
You're acknowledging, but the pasuk says Svartim. You have to count
announcing it. No, you're announcing it. Even doesn't.
You would need to. Yeah, it's Svartim is speech verbally. You need to come on to some great logic to permit writing it. Think about that. All right.
No.
Yeah.
What's called the Mishna Berura pointed out Sofat by Schmitten and Yobel. So nobody asked the kasha. How come there's no mitzvah to to say a bracha and count over there, or there is a bracha to count over the Shemitah?
Yeah, Beis Din does it.
The Beis Din says a bracha?
There is. If they do a bracha or not, I think they might. Not
Okay.
sure. I'm not holding the halachas of Shemitah and Yovel.
No, I'm just saying.
They might.
Because that was, we had all
That was the
time
Radbaz. That's the Radbaz in Chelik Dalit Siman 1102. I actually looked it up in the physical version of the Radbaz at home, and I made the PDF file and everything. By the way, most of that Chok Yaakov, 95% of it, who handled that question was the Radbaz, and that was the only video, the only comment I've gotten in a month from all this year I put up. Someone said, "Thanks so much. This is great content."
Wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
because I split it up into 3, so it was more digestible. That was only like
by the women?
that was only like 8 minutes. Yeah, why don't women say a bracha on 7 clean days? That's how I titled it.
The man or woman, thank you for the content.
It was a man.
It was a man.
Probably most of the people watching are men. I mean, I could see. I looked at it a while ago. Most of them are men, but there are women who watch.
Okay.
Yeah, they go watch.
I mean, how can you tell?
You could tell by the gender, at least what the computer says is the gender that does it. But they think it is what they think it is. You know, I guess they know.